Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/IDontWorkHereLady. And today we have 3 stories about people who can't tell the difference between a workplace and private property. And the first story: I don't work here, I live here. But before we start, I just want to thank everyone who supports the channel by commenting, subscribing, and liking. Thanks a lot. And let's get started. Mostly I lurk here. I suffer from a combination of resting bee face and what I call retail invisibility, meaning I often seem to be invisible to both retail workers and other customers. I'll apologize in advance for my wordiness. When I have a story to tell, I like to tell a story. No TLDRs are forthcoming from my keyboard. Also, I apparently really like parentheses today. So, I was out in my front yard weeding. Nothing I was wearing looked like any sort of uniform or had any logo on it. In fact, I was wearing paint-stained shorts and a t-shirt that had both seen better days. I was on my knees wielding a weed knife. It's a great tool, and if you do any gardening, I highly recommend it. I'm sure it would make an excellent weapon in the event of a zombie apocalypse as well. I live at the top of a busy T intersection, so I paid no attention to the cars passing by until I heard a, "Hey! Hey! Hey you!" For a moment, I honestly thought it was probably that brat Brandon's mom from down the street. Brandon's mom stands on her porch and yells, "Brandon! Brandon! 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 Brandon!" incessantly. Brandon ignores her because his mom never actually leaves the porch to make him do anything, except that voice seemed to be coming from right behind me. I turned around to find a white Mustang sitting in the middle of the intersection, and pretty far into the oncoming lane, and a middle-aged guy hanging out of the driver's side window, while a middle-aged woman with an 80s helmet hair / Margaret Thatcher hairdo leaned over him. "What do you charge for yard work?" the guy asked. Now, I'd been out in the sun, sweating for a few hours and not thinking about much other than the chores that needed doing today, so I wasn't too swift on the uptake. "What yard work?" I asked. Yard work, gardening, mowing, that kind of crap. What do you charge? Who do you work for?" Seriously, I must have had a touch of sunstroke. I was so slow. "I work for blank blank, name of company I work for, name of which does not indicate their business. What are you asking about?" For the record, I don't live in the kind of neighborhood where people hire gardeners. Even the elderly people, some of whom are weirdly obsessive about mowing their yards, don't do more than hire some kids to run a lawnmower across their grass. Most people on my street just have grass or ivy, but the previous owners of my house made an attempt to landscape, so I've continued and improved it. It certainly doesn't look professionally done, though. I think you can see where this is going. "What do you charge for yard work? Is your boss around?" At this point, it was clear the guy was starting to think I was a bit slow, too. Then came the real choice bit. "The rest of the yard crews around here are all spicks and wetbacks. They won't do a thing if I'm not there to watch over them for a second. I want to hire decent white people to do my yard." I apologize for the use of slurs, but that's what the a-hole actually said. And I'm not fond of the practice of partially blanking out a word when everybody knows what the word is. The light bulb finally dawned. I stood up. My knees probably made a god-awful sound, but I did it without moaning. I replied in a monotone, "I don't work here. I live here. This is my yard." "Don't give me the runaround. This neighborhood is much too expensive for a girl like you. Who's your boss? I don't have all day here." All this was said in a very belligerent, "don't you know who I am" tone. So at this point, the synopsis had woken up and were firing again. Mr. Mustang thought he was in expensive high-tax borough, which borders my much less expensive lower-tax borough. High-tax borough is about 5 blocks over. You can't actually tell you're in different municipality unless you look at the house prices, which run about half again to twice as much in my neighborhood. When you get a bit farther over on the other side of the cemetery, you get into the really pricey, fancy area of high-tax borough, where quite a few people do indeed hire yard crews, who are in fact mostly Hispanic. But they have much, much bigger yards than mine. In other words, Mr. Mustang is an idiot. I wasn't too happy about the girl bit either. I'm 42. I'm starting to look it, or at least within 5 to 10 years of it. Maybe I looked even a little younger due to my shabby clothes, unstyled hair, and lack of makeup, but still, I'm pretty obviously past the girl stage. I've also learned that you should never ever assume that appearance equals income. "This is my yard and my house, dipstick," I told him coldly. You're in lower tax borough, not high tax borough. Get your racist butt the F out of here. You're blocking the intersection. This is paraphrased slightly. There were more swear words than what I actually said. A lot more swear words and some other insults. But this is the gist of it. Also, while all of this was going on, several cars had driven up to the intersection and honked at Mr. Mustang, then drove around him. It's sadly not uncommon for D-bags to block our rather narrow streets while they do whatever it is that they do. Mrs. Mustang, I assume, gasped. Mr. Mustang went red in the face and started to make like he was going to get out of the car, so I held up the weed knife and started ostentatiously wiping the dirt off it. This worked really well with the dude who drove by last summer while I was working on the front yard and yelled some choice insults at me. Mr. Mustang drove off really fast and nearly hit someone coming in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, he missed them. However, he did manage to clip his passenger side mirror on one of the parked cars and knocked it clean off. When he stopped to retrieve his mirror, I managed to catch his license plate number and left a note on the car he hit. Here's hoping Mr. Mustang's car insurance premiums go up. He finds out he actually lives in my low tax borough and not the fancy neighboring high tax borough, and all the grass in his yard dies. Our second story. I don't work here. Home edition. So, although this didn't happen in a retail setting, I believe it fits in the spirit of this sub. One recent afternoon, I was home alone. My preteens, 11 and 12, had gone to play with some friends at the park across the street. I'd been up late the night before, so I was running on fumes. I fell asleep for a lovely minute in the living room, only to be woken moments later by an angry, loud banging on my front door. I groggily answer it. It's a neighbor I vaguely recognize. She, of course, is wearing yoga pants, pushing a jogging stroller with a wee one inside, and has a stellar RBF. "You have blonde kids, right?" she barks. "No. My kids have dark hair, like me," I tell her, wondering WTF she wants. "Well, you know them, right? I see them over here all the time." I tell her, "Yeah, I know them. They're my kids' friends." "Well, where do they live?" she demands. Now, I'm not about to give out private info to strangers, and I can't remember the exact address anyway. "They live down that street," I said, pointing around the corner. "Well, anyway," she replies, "I just wanted to let you know that I've seen those children on multiple occasions cross the street without looking." "Okay," I said, getting annoyed at this bee, "but they're not my kids." "Well, I see them over here all the time. What are you going to do about it? It's just not safe." Again, I said, "They're not my kids." "Well, I've seen them over here on several occasions. Besides, those kids shouldn't be at the park by themselves." I just stared at her blankly, realizing in my sleepy state that she's not only a horrible helicopter mom, she's never going to get off my porch or STFU. "Okay," I said, "thank you for letting me know." I then very gently closed the door. This was my mistake. I immediately heard sputtering and yelling, "How dare you slam the door in my face? How rude! I demand you open this very door this minute and speak to me." The yelling continued, and I decided this lady had lost her mind. I decided to go out my back door, leaving her yelling on my porch. I run across the street to the park, see my kids and their blonde friends, and tell them to look both ways. I then ask my kids to come home. I'm afraid crazy lady will show up with her jogging stroller and make a scene. As we're heading home, dang, I run into said crazy lady barreling down the sidewalk toward the park. Crap. "How dare you slam the door on me? You're a very rude, horrible person," she exclaims. "Listen, lady," I tell her while cutting across my backyard, "those weren't my kids, but I told them to look both ways. I didn't mean to slam the door on you or to be rude, but you woke me up to complain about kids that aren't even mine." "Well, you didn't need to be sleeping while your kids are at the park anyway." She then stormed off to spread her joy elsewhere, and I wish the story ended there, except I've heard from other neighbors she's talking trash about us. She is a lovely gem. Thank goodness she isn't my direct next-door neighbor, at least. I don't work here. I live here. I live in a very rural area in an old farmhouse that shares a property line with a tree nursery business. They have a sign in front, but it really just looks like a big farm with a lot of heavy equipment. On the day, a Sunday, we were moving into the new house. A very old guy in overalls came walking up my driveway. He's big, fat, and you can just tell by the look at him that he's PO'd. Old guy equals OG. OG, why aren't you over there working? Me, huh? I've been waiting for you over an hour now. I drove 60 miles to buy 100 tomato cages from you, and you got me waiting this whole time. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't work there. I live here. OG, yeah, right. You just don't want to admit I'm right. Me. You see that moving truck right there? You see my family unpacking boxes from it and taking them into the house? I live here. OG with a blank stare. There's a phone number on the sign in front of the business. Call it and get the F off my property before I call the cops. I don't have a phone. Can you call? Blank stare from me. You drove 60 miles to get here, didn't call ahead of time to see if they were open, then came over here to yell at me when you couldn't find an employee? No, sir, I don't have a phone. I'm calling the cops. With that, I took out my cell phone and started dialing. He hightailed it out of there. No idea if he ever got the tomato cages. Hope he didn't. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video to the end, and we'll see you in the next one.